Hi scholars, let's look at TEK 4.3g. It says I can represent fractions and decimals to the tenths or hundredths as distances from 0 on a number line. Represent means to show using a model or a picture, and I'm going to be using these number lines and my fraction manipulatives with my decimal manipulatives right here. So let's get started. Before I begin drawing on a number line, I just wanted to review a few things. I wanted to review decimal place value. So after the decimal, this is the tenths place. And the reason it's called the tenths is because we think of dimes that way. So like if I had 45 cents, that's like 4 dimes, which is 40 cents, and then 5 pennies. So if you think of tenths as dimes, then you need to think of this as pennies. And if this is pennies, then this is the hundredths place. Because it takes 100 pennies to make $1, it takes 10 dimes to make $1. And we use the tenths block to represent a tens block to represent the tenths place, because if a dime is worth 10 cents, then we need to think of 10, hundredths making 1/10. And a dime is 1/10 of $1. And then for the pennies, we use the ones blocks to represent it, because it takes 100 of these to fill up one of these, and we use this to represent the ones. If this is really overwhelming information, I strongly suggest you watch the other video that talks about representing fractions and decimals, like relating them to each other, because this is just a brief review, and then I'm going straight to number lines. So I will link the other video in the information down below. So let's go ahead and get started. So for this first part, I'm going to focus only on the tenths. And so what I did was I took a number line and I broke it up into 10 sections. And in order to make it 10 sections, I broke it up into, I used 9 lines from 0 to 1. So there are 10 spaces, but there are 9 lines. So I'm going to just start right here. And so before you ever fill out a number line, and you're trying to figure out, what each place value is, always count the spaces. So when you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you know that it's cut up into tenths. So I always like to do fractions first, just because that kind of helps. So if this is 10 pieces, then this is 1/10, so then this is 0/10. This would be 2 out of 10. Okay, so that's 1 out of 10. So if these 2 were shaded in, that would be 2 out of 10. If these 3 are shaded in, that's 3 out of 10. If these 4 are shaded in, that's 4 out of 10. If these 5 are shaded in, that's 5 out of 10. Okay, I'm going to keep going. These 6 shaded in is 6 out of 10. 7 out of 10. 8 out of 10. 9 out of 10, and then when you get to 1 over 1, that's 10 out of 10. Okay, so I'm going to show you visually, using manipulatives, exactly what's going on. So if I have nothing here, and I have 1/10 here, that's what 1/10 looks like. In this next one, I have 2/10. So then there's 1/10 plus 1/10 equals 2/10. In this next one, I have 3/10. In this next one, I have 4/10. And then keep going. I'm actually going to not be able to do all the way, because I don't have enough tenths. Let's see, what else? Here's 6/10. Seven-tenths. Sorry, this is taking so long. And then I think I have to call it a stopping point because I have no more pieces. But you get the idea. You get the idea. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Okay, so you get the idea. So now, this is where it gets a little tough. This is where you have to also represent the decimal. And a lot of students will hear the words 1/10, because that's how you read the fraction, and they will think they need to write 1/10. And that is not at all correct. If you think about this as dollars, this is like $1.10, okay? We are, if this is $0 and that's $1, then how can we have $1.10 here? You know what I mean? $1.10 would be starting right there. So we are less than $1. We are less than $1. And if you think about it, this is 1/10. 1/10 of $1 is 10 cents or a dime. Think of this as a dime. So a dime would only be this much. The reason I didn't put a 0 is because we are in the tenths place right now. You can pretend, like you can imagine like a pretend 0 right there, just for like, you know, it helps students to think of every decimals as money to help just kind of visualize what's going on. But if I ask for 1/10 and I want the decimal that goes with it, you have to give me decimal 1, because that 1 is in the tenths place, and the way you read this decimal is 1/10. And so that's how you read the fraction, 1/10. So then to represent this, that's 2/10. So then I would do decimal 2, because the 2 is in the tenths place. So then 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10. Now, you say 10/10, but you know 10/10 is equivalent to 1 whole. I want you to just think of $1. There's always that imaginary decimal after a whole number. I've explained that in other videos. There's always this imaginary decimal after a whole number. You only bring it up if you are going into the decimals. But if you have like $6 or 6 pencils or 6 markers, you don't need to put 6 point and, you know, leave it at that. Just write down 6. Sometimes on calculators you might see it too. So this is what decimals and fractions look like on a number line, corresponding with each other. Now I'm going to look at a second example where it's going past 1 whole. So all I did was I just took away all the pieces, and I changed that 0 to $1, and I changed it to $2 over there. So my fractions are going to be a little different. So if this is 1 whole, then this is 10 over 10, right? Or $1. So this is still cut up into 10 pieces. So this means this is 1 whole, and then this is 1 whole plus 1/10. So this section would look like that. Do you see that? So that means this is 1 whole and 1/10. And that means this is 1 and 1/10. The way you read this fraction is 1 and 1/10. That's exactly how you read the decimal, 1 and 1/10. You know how before we used to just say 1/10? Now you say 1 and 1/10. When you see a decimal, you say the word and. Okay? So let's look at another one. the next one is 1 whole and 2 tenths. 1 and 2 tenths. So then I just put that there, and then I put that there. So the same thing, 1 and 3 tenths, 1 and 3 tenths, 1 and 4 tenths, 1 and 4 tenths, 1 and 5 tenths, 1 and 5 tenths, 1 and 6 tenths, 1 and 6 tenths, 1 and 7 tenths, 1 and 7 tenths, 1 and 8 tenths, 1 and 8 tenths, 1 and 9 tenths, 1 and 9 tenths. Now over here, you don't say 1 and 10 tenths, because once you hit 1 whole, that actually, or 10 over 10 or 9 over 9 or whatever, then that becomes 1 whole. So if you have 1 and 10 tenths, it's now 2. And then it looks like that. There is something I forgot to explain in my other video, in my previous video. This is what the decimal model of 1/10 looks like. So if this is 1/10 for decimals, because that's 1 shaded in out of 10 pieces, then, you know, its equivalent fraction picture would be the same too. Like this is 1/10. So like if I had a decimal, or if I had this, then like that's 1/10, 1 out of 10 pieces. And then this is also 1 out of 10 pieces. So 1/10 and 1/10. I also wanted to show you that on the back, its decimal equivalent is on the back. And so then that's what the decimal looks like for 1 whole. So now I'm going to move on to hundredths. Okay, so real quick before I move on to hundredths, I just wanted to show you the visual model with the fraction piece. So this is 1 out of 10 pieces. So this is 1/10, and then the fraction is also called 1/10. See that? So then 2 tenths, 3 tenths, 4 tenths, 5 tenths, 6 tenths, and then 7 tenths, and then for 8 tenths, I don't have all the pieces, but here is what 8 tenths would look like with one more piece. And then here is 9. There's 9 tenths. And then obviously when you have 10 tenths, you have 1 whole. And then the entire thing will be shaded in. Okay, so to explain hundredths, I went ahead and drew my number line from 0 to 1/10, or 10 hundredths. So this is what 10 hundredths looks like. It's 100 pieces, and 10 out of 100 are shaded in. So the way you read that is 10 hundredths. This is what it looks like in writing. Wherever your number stops, whatever place value it stops in, you say that. So 10 hundredths. You don't say 10 tenths, you say 10 hundredths. So if this is between 0 and 10, that means each of these has a value of 1. But remember, we're in decimals, so it's like we're under 10 cents. So this would be 1 cent. So 1/100th is how you would say it. So there's just one piece to represent 1/100th. And here is what 1/100th looks like. 1 cent. So then if I added one more to it, it would be 2 hundredths. So then one more would be 3 hundredths. Three hundredths. Hope you can see these. Here's 4 hundredths. Here's 5 hundredths. Think of each of these as a penny. That's the best way you can picture this. Think of each of these as a penny. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this will be 6 hundredths. Here's kind of a visual of 5 hundredths. I don't have fraction pieces, but I kind of think of these as fraction pieces also, even though they're place value blocks. Because, I mean, if you think about it, one of these is 1 out of 100. And so, I mean, if I had 100 pieces, like fraction bars cut into pieces, you know, it would be the same thing. They would be this tiny. So here is 700ths, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, wait, let me take one back. Okay, so 600ths, 700ths, 800ths, 900ths, and then once you hit 10, you know, it becomes 10 hundredths. So, fraction-wise, let's use this one first. We know that this is 5 hundredths because there are 5 shaded in out of 100 pieces. So if I were to write that as a fraction, exactly how I read this, that's exactly how I write the fraction. The 5 stops in the hundredths place, so 5 hundredths. I have 5 pieces out of 100. Think of like each of these pieces replacing the green on here. That would be 5 out of 100. So this is 1 out of 100, 2 out of 100, 3 hundredths, 4 hundredths, 5 hundredths, 6 hundredths, 7 hundredths, 8 hundredths, 9 hundredths, and then you could call that 10 hundredths because technically 10 out of 100 are shaded in. So this is how you represent hundredths on a number line. Now I'm going to go into real quick what it would look like if you had from 1 to 1 1/10. Okay, so I'm going to add the changes in red. So if I had one whole, which this is considered one whole in decimal place value. So if I have one whole and 100, I would say 1 and 100. So 1 and 100. So then this is 1 and 200ths. 1 and 200ths. 1 and 300ths. 1 and 300ths. 1 and 400ths. 1 and 400ths. Keep going. Exactly how you read the fraction is exactly how you read the decimal. When you see a decimal, you need to say the word and. Okay, so I want to go back real fast to tenths again. And I went ahead and labeled them 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, all the way up to 1. And so my question is, suppose you're asked what goes right there. Okay, so I want you to just picture that you have here 1/10, which is this, okay, or let's turn it that way, 1/10, 1 out of 10, and then you also have 2/10. Actually, I'm going to use these two real quick. You have 1/10 and 2/10. So think a dime and 2 dimes. So that's like 10 cents and that's 20 cents. What would go right in the middle? Well, if you think about it, like I said, it's like 10 cents, 20 cents. So then in the middle you would have 15 cents. So this is what the middle would look like. It's like having this and 5 more. You see that? That's 10. You know, like imagine that or that's 10 cents, okay, a dime. And then that's 20 cents. So that's 10 cents and then 5 pennies. That's a dime and 5 pennies. So 15 cents. So then if you were asked what goes here, you do the same thing. You do an imaginary 0 and you change that to, you make 45 cents. Suppose you're asked what goes right there. Well, if that's 50 cents and that's 60 cents, you can think of it as maybe 59 cents. I don't know. It just kind of depends. So sometimes you are asked to look between the tenths and you have to now think of hundredths that way. I wanted you to see this one other way. So we had the 1/10 on the number line and we had 2/10. So between the 1/10 and the 2/10 is right after 1/10, which remember when you put the imaginary 0 you have 10 hundredths. So then with one extra piece you have 11 hundredths. Then you have 12 hundredths. Then you have 13 hundredths. Then you have 14 hundredths. Then you have 15 hundredths. And that's what's right in the middle of your number line. Or in the middle between 1/10 and 2/10 is 15 hundredths, I'm sorry. So then, you know, if I'm like right here, then that's 16 hundredths. Then I come right there, it's 17 hundredths. Come right there, it's 18 hundredths. Right over there, 19 hundredths. Then these both, Then these both go, and then that turns over, and then you're at 2/10, which right after the 9, there's nothing, so it's actually 2/10. So I hope you kind of have a better understanding of fractions and decimals on a number line.